My name is Nebo Zuckerman. I'm the Director of Development. And so tonight, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Shapell, Darche Noam, Midrasha, Shaya, Melaveh, Malka for tonight. This is going to be a little bit different than what you're usually used to. We have three incredible rabbis who are going to come up here and have a whole entire discussion, answers, questions amongst themselves with three questions that we sent out. Thank you to the committee that put the questions together. I really want to say thank you to the alumni committee who took the time to organize the questions in this event. So really a round of applause for them. Also tonight, when we go back to the all the goodies, the treats and the cakes and the cookies, we'll be having our raffle, our first ever Shapell's raffle. So there is time to buy tickets afterwards. So if you'd like to buy a ticket, please do so. You can help bring in people from Chutz La'aretz to Israel to come join us for a week at a hotel, 2 tickets of the airplane, and then as well as, or you could have the cash prize of $4,700. So that's tonight. So the raffle will be live on Facebook, and if someone from Chutz La'aretz sees it, don't worry, they'll be called after Shabbos, their Shabbos, but they hopefully won't see it live. They'll see it delayed. Okay, I'd like to call upon Rabbi Karlinsky, Rosh Yeshiva, to be the host for tonight.
Michael Citron just walked in. I want to just give him a yesher koyach because he spearheaded the new format that we're having tonight. We hope it's helpful and beneficial. So we're going to have 3 questions out of many that were submitted that we thought were the most relevant to the most number of people. And also being answered by Baruch Hashem, the wide perspective that we provide in Darche Noam, Shapell's Midrasha Rachel, Rabbi Schoonmaker, Rosh Yeshiva Shapell's, Rabbi Shurin, the Rosh Midrasha Midrasha Rachel, and one of our newest staff members, Rabbi Yonatan Kohn. And I think you will get some different perspectives and yet see that there's certain common denominators that underlie everyone's approach. So the first question, again, in the email that you got, you literally had a 1-sentence tamtzit. I'm going to read the question in a more expanded way, and this is what they're going to be addressing. Each of us has chosen to leave Chutz La'aretz and raise our families in Eretz Yisrael. This decision has its rewards and its challenges. Our children are totally immersed in Israeli culture, and while we may have lived in Israel for decades, sacrifices were made. Lack of family support, challenges with Parnasa, unfamiliarity with a totally new system, language barrier, we're still called chutzniks. And as we became parents, we face new and excruciating chinuch challenges with our children. In addition, our parents are aging in Chutz La'aretz. We're not able to be there to help them. Not being there for them is painful for all concerned. We became Balei Tshuva, which was a tremendous challenge. Aliyah is a bigger challenge. How do we bridge between the old and the new, between one culture and the next? How can we help our children navigate in this culture, which will always be somewhat foreign to us? Are there elements of chutznik culture that we should insist on instilling in our children? And we're going to start with Rabbi Kohn, please.
Okay, I'm going to...
You have to turn it on.
Is this working?
Yeah.
Okay. Firstly, I'd like to express my great thanks to Shapell's Chlal for an extraordinary opportunity to...
Louder. Much louder. That won't help. No. Put it real close. Speak very loud.
I would first just like to thank the Yeshiva for the extraordinary opportunity to be in such a very, very special place on a day-to-day basis. It's my first public opportunity to express that. In particular, I would also like to thank Rabbi Karlinsky and the Hanhala. This week in the Yeshiva we celebrated Rabbi Karlinsky's Siyum HaShas, which was inspiring and humbling as an audience member to experience and watch, and that I was selected to sit on this panel is beyond words. So many, many thanks. With respect to the question, I would like to highlight take one angle, which is the question asks about the sacrifice the sacrifices that were made for making aliyah. So let's talk for a moment about the premise. What exactly are the sacrifices? Sometimes when you talk about purchasing something, you talk about costs and benefits. So if you buy a new house, you buy a new car, it costs money. You don't call that a sacrifice if you want the car. You don't call it a sacrifice if you want the house. Ultimately, part of the answer is, what question are you asking? Have we really made a sacrifice? It's easy for me to say, for the particular circumstances under which I made aliyah. I understand that other people perhaps have given up more on a daily basis, are giving up more, but part of it is not talking about the sacrifice. The truth is, in English, you have the word sacrifice, it sounds like what I'm giving up. In Hebrew, the equivalent is korban. It has nothing to do with what I'm giving up at all. It's just about the goal. It's that I'm coming close. So here, I'm reminded of the pasuk in Behalotcha, where Bnei Yisrael are on their way towards Eretz Yisrael, and all of a sudden they stop and they say, but what about the watermelons? What about the fish and the watermelons and the onions in Egypt? And you're sitting there and your heart sinks to say, really? You have destiny, you have eternity, you have glory, you have Ratzon Hashem. This is the reason da'atra for God's creation, the entire universe, and you stop and say, oh, I missed the watermelons? So at a certain point, the question is, what exactly are the sacrifices that are bothering us? Now, the question that is asked involves, okay, I'm worried about my aging parents. We'll come back to that a little bit later. But that's the first premise, is the issue of sacrifice. When you talk about the benefits, another premise of the question seems to be, this is something additional. Okay, I became frum, I adopted all these mitzvot, and now I'm coming to Eretz Yisrael. So I wonder aloud, what exactly is the difference between all the mitzvot and Eretz Yisrael? In particular, it sounds like it's something new, something extra. Of course, when you're taking upon yourself something new, when you're engaging in something you haven't done before, it's a question: am I going to make this commitment or not? But again, part of the perspective is: wait a second, is this really something new? I look at the Eretz Yisrael issue a little bit like this. I had a diamond ring. An extraordinary diamond ring. It was beautiful, it was special, I knew it was worth something, it was precious to me, and then some goon took it away. They took away the diamond ring and I'm left without my diamond ring, but instead he gives me a cubic zirconium. Now this might be beautiful and shiny and sparkly, but I know it's not a diamond ring. So every time I look at it, and maybe the people around me say, oh, that looks nice, and maybe I'll look in the mirror and say, I look pretty good, but ultimately, I don't have my diamond. So for thousands of years later, I've become so enamored with the idea that there's a cubic zirconium, which is a sparkly, pretty thing. I've totally forgotten there's a diamond. I get a little note in my mailbox that says, if you want your diamond, just go pick it up from the post office. It's really a diamond. So if I'm still in love with my cubic zirconium, what happened to me? That's really what we should be thinking of. I think that's what everyone in this room has really decided at a certain point when we talk about Eretz Yisrael is actually all of those things, and there are amazing things, and there are difficult things, but we're a little bit seduced by the fact, there's my timer, we're a little bit seduced by the fact that, yeah, I'm comfortable speaking English, and I like my 2 cars, or whatever it is. By the way, some people can afford 2 cars in Eretz Yisrael now also, but 3 maybe, I don't know. But I like my extra room in my bedroom. Those are things you've given up. But if you think about it, those were cheap replacements for the real deal. The real deal is living in Eretz Yisrael, being close to Hashem. We talk about whether it's a mitzvah, a formal mitzvah or not. When I decided to make aliyah was when I was learning for a year in Shalvim, and I said there's a dispute, a debate among the poskim if living in Eretz Yisrael is a formal mitzvah. But wait a second. Every other parsha in Sefer Devarim begins with V'haya ki tavo al haaretz. So even if it's not a formal mitzvah, this is a basic premise of the Torah. I'm going to give that up because I like my extra large bedroom. So at a certain point, it's a question of perspective. I'm coming a little bit past my time, so I'm going to hand it off to the next speaker.
Thank you very much.
Hello?
Yeah, Gary? Okay, great. Thank you very much, Remington. Look, there is, I mean, you were speaking about more idealistic ideas. There's a practical side of it also that has to be discussed. And the practical side is, you know, is the person able to make a living? Of course, if the person can make a living and support his family, but he can't support it the way he does in the 5 towns, idealism should override that, and I completely agree with you. But on a practical sense, not everybody who comes can make a living. Not everyone who comes can deal with Israeli society. We spoke about Israeli culture, right? There's no question that the children know how to do that. I just want to point out that the first week I made aliyah, I was on aliyah myself and Esther. We were just married, 7 weeks, and when we got to Israel, we happened to have moved to an area right close to my uncle's, Karlinsky, and I met him. A few days after he made aliyah, we started schmoozing. He had come on aliyah 10 years before, and the first time we meet, he says to me, Yitzchak, did you learn how to push yet? So there are definitely certain things, cultural things, which you know, people from the United States, other places, have to get used to. And Baruch Hashem, we hope that everybody can get past the little things because of the bigger things that Rabbi Kohn was speaking about, right? And I agree with him with regard to that. But not everybody can get past it. You know, different people have different experiences in Israel. And some people can get past those experiences until they get used to the country a little bit more, and some people can't. It's harder for them. There's a lot of cultural differences. That's one. 2, leaving family in America, I think is not a simple thing. I think for a Baal Tshuva to leave family in America is even harder. I'll explain to you why. Because religious parents, even if they want you to live in America, right, they understand that you should be living in Israel, right? They have enough guilt that they know that. Okay? Secular parents, they have no clue why you should be living in Israel. Okay? America is the golden Medina, right? And you should be living there, right? You should be given to UJA, of course you should be given to UJA, but you should be living in America. Okay.
My watch does not have a timer on it. I want to relate to the end of the question, which was how can we help our children navigate in this culture that's somewhat foreign to us? There are elements of chutznik culture that we should be instilling in our children. So we'll say one word at the end about, is it worth it? Of course, we want to instill values that are important to us, that we believe in, even if they would be called chutznik values. But I very strongly believe that the right word is we want to make nuanced Israelis and not nuanced chutznikim. Because our children are living in Israeli society, and to think they're going to be chutznik, somewhere along the way they're going to hit a brick wall. But the nuances and the exceptional aspects of our, I don't want to call culture, I would call it more the Torah values that sometimes we see better expressed in chutzlars, are those that we should certainly put into our children. Our kids should not see us as weird Americans or weird English people. They should see us as someone who understands the world they're living in. And to know that world, this is we're going to get to the point about navigating, they have to think that you understand their world, and you get their world, and you're part of their world. In my society, people love politics. They love general politics, they love yeshivish politics. Neither of those are my favorite topics. But I make sure that I know something about it, because that's the world that my foreign children live in. So you have to talk the language a little bit. But there are certain lines that we'll never talk about, words that we won't use, etc., that would reflect more a chutznik background. My wife was once interviewing for a friend for a high school, and the girl she was interviewing, a high school girl, said to her, all my mother can talk about all day was Hashem. That was not a compliment. That meant there was a deep divide between her and her mother because her mother was out to lunch, so to speak. As parents, we have to understand the world that our kids live in and go into their world. And when we're in their world, then we can help navigate them the right way. But if we're in a different place, that's where the divide of generations comes, and they look at us like the same way the Italian kid looked at his father, etc. One quick word on, is it worth it? Just a general cloud, which I believe to be true, is we can't judge results all the time. A person in business, in life, has to look at the moves that he makes and make sure you make the right decisions at the time. The way it happens, both from a religious perspective of bitachon and even in a practical perspective, there are billionaires who made all the wrong moves. There are billionaires who made all the wrong moves. There are paupers who made all the right moves. There's a God in the world, and there are many, many factors. You can read about it in Malcolm Gladwell. You have to have bitachon. So what we have to look at in general is, did I make the right move? Was it the right move then? Did I use the right factors in coming to my decision? That's, I think, how we have to look at all our decisions in life.
Thank you to the three esteemed rabbis, and since everybody is definitely very frustrated by the short answers, we should let you know that we're literally only scratching the surface. These are very important issues, and all of the rabbis and all of your rebbeim, we welcome you to be in touch with us. We'll have some socializing in the yeshiva with some food, and there's no question that you should continue these discussions, because we're only scratching the surface. The next question. What is the ideal relationship between a family and its Rav? Should a Shaya be asked before every decision? When should a Rav be consulted? When should one make his own decisions?
Ask me everything. Thank you. I'm going to focus more on the first part of the question, which is what is the ideal relationship? And I'd like to bring up 4 words and quickly relate to each. Open, involved, correctly boundaried, and authoritative in nature. Open. I was very close with, still in a certain way, with Reuben Leichter, who's a pretty famous person. And I said once, Mashgiach, maybe you want to come for Shabbos with your wife. Interesting thing. He called me sometime later and he said, Dovid, I'd like to come for Shabbos. I was happy. My wife was nervous. Leichter, anybody knows him, has a penetrating analysis of people. And she thinks to herself, he's going to see all our terrible chinuch avonim mistakes, all of our chesronas. Who knows what's going to be? What kind of Shabbos can we have? She was commiserating with another wife of a student of Leichter, my friend Pinchas Lubavitch's wife Lisa, and she said to her, around this point, at the end of the day, what do you have to lose? The more he knows you, the better you are off. Which that was an amazing yesod, an amazing fundamental point. A rabbi, to know us well, we have to have an open relationship with them. If we hide things that shouldn't be hidden, and we don't talk about our challenges, our struggles, what's really on our mind, they can't help you. They can't help. So therefore, that's the first word, is to look for openness. Next is involved. You have to have an engaging and realistic, practical back and forth with a rabbi. There are 2 parts to that. One, if he's too busy, it's not going to go down. You have to find a Rav, and you have to have an ideal relationship with a rabbi who has the amount of time that you need. But, this is a very important point, the burden of involvement is on you. People expect rabbis to be available for them at every time. Rabbi, I really want a relationship. Can you speak to me from 4:25 to 4:35 Friday afternoon? Actually not. Correctly boundary. I don't want to go into that too much, but I think everybody understands these days. Relationships with rabbis also need correct boundaries for their sake, for your sake, for everybody's sake. And finally, I want to say one word about authoritative. We live with all the great advances that democracy, and really it started before democracy when man became God used to be the center of the world historically, and then man in the Enlightenment and with democracy afterwards became the center of everything. And people's rights became very pronounced and very specific, etc. And obviously mankind and the Jews amongst mankind benefited greatly from that. But on the other hand, there's much in that outlook which is not Torani. We stand for parents, we stand for elders, we stand for Talmidei Chachamim. We have kavod. Kavod is a lashon of kaved, of heavy. We see certain things as heavier than other things. When that's off, when there's no authority, so then everything falls apart. We need to accept a rabbi not as another opinion, not as a friend, a buddy, someone to relate to, but as an authority. As the Mishnah says, Aseh lecha rav, v'stalek min hasafek. The purpose of a rav, and I heard this from Rav many times, there are a lot of opinions out there, but a rav has to give you a way that you can make Torah real in your life, in your mahalach. And you have to pick the right rav. Fits your mahalach, obviously, but you have to get a further your mahalach with him. Finally, and I'm finishing with this, to say that I think in general there's a point which is, they say in chinuch habanim, if you let the kids reign too free, so it's great. They eat whatever they want, they love whatever they want, but deep down, they're scared of the world. Because they know if you're not stronger than them, then who's going to protect them against the world? It's something. So I think maybe it's true in a deeper way. It's nice not to have a rav. It's nice to be able to do whatever we want. But deep down, there's this fear that we all have. Who says we're doing the right things? That's the power, but that's the authoritative nature which we have to give our rabbanim.
Okay. I would like to respond to Rabbi Schoonmaker's points. In particular, I think there's a great challenge in establishing a trade-off between two fundamentally really opposing forces. One is the notion of bound, which Rabbi Schoonmaker left as we understand it, and Schoonmaker emphasized the aspect of authoritative. In Avot, we have two, in the first parak, we have two mandates, Aseh lecha rav. There's Aseh lecha rav, yistalek min hasafek, and the more famous one is Aseh lecha rav, v'knei lecha chaver. So it's clear that a rav has to have, there are two different kinds of rav, and the rabbanim play two different kinds of roles. There's Aseh lecha rav, v'knei lecha chaver, which may mean a chavrusa, and therefore the rav is your learning rebbe, and then Aseh lecha rav, yistalek min hasafek, really, I think, normal or superficially refers really to psak halacha. So the question really comes up is, okay, where does the advice come in? So at a certain point, or the guidance, at a certain point, Aseh lecha rav v'knei lecha chaver is a chaver who's your social chaver. So the rav is your social rav, meaning to say who's above you in a social sense, who's really, as Chazal described it, vishinantam levanacha, that those are your talmidim, because the rav is really like a father. So if we look at the Rav in that respect, the Rav is the father. The father's job, and this will really bridge also to the third question as well, the father's job is not to make decisions for you. Certainly when you're an adult. Aseh lecha rav, as Rabbi Schoonmaker also pointed out, means you need to choose a Rav who's attuned to you, who's going to give you advice which is appropriate for you, psak which is appropriate for you, but at the end of the day, you're the one who's going to do the mitzvah. You're the one who's going to have to deal with the nisayon. You're the one who's going to frame the question for the Rav. A good Rav will dig beneath the surface, but ultimately the onus is very, very heavily on you. And more than that, in terms of the bound, if we're too lax about authoritative, again, at a certain point, I think many people will take their hands off the wheel. Whatever the Rav tells me, I heard an awful story. I overheard it, and it was a first-hand story. Someone was complaining to someone else that he wasn't able to get access to a certain Rav who was taking time away from the community. And he had a daughter who was almost a month old, and he had not yet named the daughter, because he didn't have a chance to speak with the particular Rav yet, to make sure the name was a good name. And it wasn't a name that he was making up, it was a name that, if I remember correctly, when I overhearing, was a Tanakh name, but his mother had the name and he just wanted to make sure. And I said to myself, this is ridiculous. Later we heard more things about this particular Rav, in terms of, and I don't know how much is his fault, his community's fault, but it's ridiculous that your hands are so tied. You can't name your daughter for a month, because you can't speak to that Rav about a name which is a Tanakh name. So, and again, and this is an unpopular point, but if your father is your father, you go to him, you want to go to him. There's a notion of visiting your Rav on the regel. And if you look at the pasuk which is the source of that, more than just the regel. Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, you should visit your Rav, you should seek out your father. But you don't ask every single question to your father. If the father has done a good job at a certain point, he wants you to make the right decision. And you shouldn't feel like you're incapacitated without talking to the Rav first. The Rav is your father, the Rav is your conduit to Hashem, but he's not going to take your place. He shouldn't take your place.
So first of all, I just want to point out that, just to make sure that everybody understands here, that what Darche Noam tries to do, Midrasha Rachel, Shapell's, nobody said that. They actually, this is hard to believe today, that they actually make you try to think for yourself, okay? And that's extremely important. In other words, we want to empower our students, our alumni, to think for themselves. And therefore, even if you do go to a Rav, right? And again, there's times you go to a Rav for Ashkafa, for Halacha, and it may be different than if you go to a Rav for Halacha. There you may have to accept his psak. On Ashkafa, I'm not so sure you have to accept what he tells you. Marbe Eitza, Marbe Tvuna, the Mishnah Nova says. You go to a number of different Rabbanim for Eitza, if you're not happy with one Eitza. And, of course, at the end of the day, before you go to a Rav, you should think things through for yourself. And if they make sense, again, I'm not talking where if someone doesn't have a Yedi and Halacha, right? But if someone sees something in the Mishnah Brura, he doesn't have to ask the Rav. I mean, I remember some person went to Rav Shlomo Zalman, and he asked him a question. Rav Shlomo Zalman started yelling at him, because he said, it's in the Mishnah Brura. I answer questions that are not in the Mishnah Brura, right? So why? Because this person doesn't understand. You have a Shulchan Aruch, you can look in the Mishnah Brura, and you find an answer. And then you don't have to, number one, you don't have to go to Rav Shlomo Zalman. Number two, you don't have to bother Rav Shlomo Zalman. He has more important things. That's number one. Number two, it says Aseh L'cha Rav, the Maharal says. It doesn't say Aseh L'cha Talmud. Okay? The Rav is not supposed to make the Talmud dependent. Okay? And like at every issue, he has to come and ask. It was very good. Rabbi Kohn said, like, to go ask about the name of a child, right? Because it's a good name, not a good name. And today, you have to go to not only to the Rav, you have to go to the Kabbalist and to the Rebbe and find out if it's a good name. In my day, nobody asked the Rav and the Kabbalist if it was a good name and not a good name. No one changed the name, okay? Because somebody said it wasn't a good name, right? People went and they gave the name, and I know these people who had these names because they're my age and they're doing well. so nobody came and asked, right? This is a generation that they're creating dependence, and in Shapell's and Midrasha Rachel we create independence. Thank you.
The format is that at the end we're going to maybe have a little bit of a round robin that people are going to respond a little bit. I just want to add one thing, even though I'm not on the panel, that I'm going to activate executive privilege. Rav Dessler alludes to the issue of when do you go and ask. And Rav Dessler basically says you ask when you have a suffix. A suffix means that there are two equally balanced sides and you can't adjudicate between them. When that happens, there's no way you could walk out of the discussion with the Rav dissatisfied. Many times people come and they say, I went into the Rav and he didn't get it, or I'm not happy with what he said. So what we're really looking for is for the Rav to sign off on what you want, as opposed to really having a suffix. And this is the idea that you've got to think before you walk in so that you can present two equally balanced sides. One of the things Rav Shlomo Zalman was saying is you're not asking me a question because there's only one way to look at it. So I think that's an important point when we talk about when is it appropriate and then how do you respond to it. Anyway, we'll probably come back to this, I think, at the end when we have a little bit more round discussion. Oh, on each question? Is that how that was the format? Okay, fine. So then I'll let Rabbi Schoonmaker have something to add to it. Go ahead, sorry.
I was just curious, who learned that way, that Asilik Rav Chaver is one person? I never saw that.
That's not like
I thought
No.
Those
Those two things are related.
I also
No, he means the concept.
Yes.
Yeah.
Concept.
Yeah, but you have someone in a social context. You have a chaver who's your peer, you have your Rav who's your social Rav, meaning to say serving a social, mental, emotional function. Say l'charav, just like you have the chaver, Was your
It's not-
social?
All right, so we'll move on to the third question. This was, okay. This is a tough question, and the mistake of the asker was that the person asking the question thought that this is a Bal Tshuva problem, because it opened with as a chozeret or chozer b'tshuva. I made a choice to be religious. My children are also making their own choices. How can I come to terms with the fact that my children may make different choices than I have made? If they do decide to renounce a Torah lifestyle, how to maintain a peaceful and loving relationship? So to summarize the question, it's very sharp for a Bal Tshuva, because your kids can come to you and say, you didn't follow in your parents' path, why do I have to follow in your path? But it's not limited to a Bal Tshuva family, because today we have lots of choices and everybody's exposed, and it's a problem in the FFB world as well as in the Bal Tshuva world. Of course, there's a phrase for it in English, OTD, off the derech. It's a universal problem, one of the things that I heard from one of the big people today when I discussed this question with him, so we said, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So how is it that the children are behaving so differently than the parents? He said, in a hurricane, the apple falls far from the tree. Okay? So I just want to modify that slightly. I believe that the apple does not fall far from the tree in midos. We're in a hurricane of observance and of authority, and the apple can fall very far from the tree. It's not just a problem for Balei Tshuva, it's a problem for every frum family in today's society. But I think that if we're going to sharpen the question in the Bal Tshuva families, it's that your kids have role models of parents who didn't follow in their parents' way, and that could be make it a little more vulnerable. But I'd like to hear now what our panelists have to say.
Okay. As far as, again, I agree with Rabbi Karlinsky as far as the Bal Tshuva is concerned. Of course, since they are much more idealistic, because they didn't take their religion for granted, it is harder on them in a certain way when a child goes off, number one. Number two, it's very hurtful because they had made the decision to become observant, right? I never made the decision to become observant. I know people say that even a frum from birth should make the decision to become observant. I never made that decision. I don't remember thinking about it, right? I don't think I'm naive because of it or closed-minded. But the Bal Tshuva made a conscious decision to do that, and therefore, of course, it is more difficult. But as far as any child, like Rabbi Karlinsky said, is concerned, when a child chooses a path different than our path, and again, let's assume the worst case scenario is as a path which is he's becoming secular or she's becoming secular. Okay, so the most important thing, in my opinion, is love. In other words, that the child has to feel unconditional love. Okay, and they're testing you basically. They test every parent. When they become secular, the first thing they think about is, are my parents going to love me? And if they don't love me, I know that their love wasn't real. Because whether or not you're frum or not, your parents should be in love with their child. Okay? And they should be accepting their child the way they are. Now that doesn't mean, love and acceptance is unconditional. But approval is conditional. You have to approve of everything that they do, right? I could say I don't approve of that, right? But the child, usually who's a teenager, may not listen. But you have a right to state your opinion. But the love has to come through. I know as when I was about age 22, I studied under Rav Pam, and he told me, when we spoke about this, that he once heard a story about the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, somebody came to the Baal Shem Tov and asked, what do I do with my son? He became secular, which was not so uncommon in those days either, right? He became secular, so what do I do? So the Baal Shem Tov said, do you love him? So he said, yeah. He says, now you have to love him more. Not less, but you have to love him more, because now he needs that love, because a lot of these kids who go off, they go off because of different painful situations they lived through, right? And once in a while you get a kid who went off because he was influenced by something in his university, like, something philosophical. But most of the time, it's not so academic. It's more, there's emotional things going on with the child, and that's why they went off. So that type of thing, that usually causes a lot of pain to children or young adults. So when a child's in pain, you don't leave them in the street. You take care of them when a child's in pain. And when a child's in pain, they're not that in control of themselves. If someone's in physical pain, right, when a woman gives birth, right, and she's in physical pain right before the birth, you can't really discuss philosophical topics with her. I mean, there may be a few women like that, but I don't remember trying that with my wife, right? So when a person physically, I had a kidney stone. You couldn't really discuss much with me when I was going through that pain, right? All you could do is take care of me, right? And that's what you should be doing with a child in pain, taking care of them. And that's extremely important, that it's unconditional love, unconditional acceptance. And you always have to realize there is a pintal yid. Okay, there's a small pintal yid in every one of these kids, and you have to be aware of it. I just met a student, a child of a student of mine, okay, who, an alum from over 30 years ago. She told me, the student, this child told me she was off for 10 years, and now she came back, okay? I've heard stories from people that a child called a parent from Las Vegas, okay? Child had gone off completely, called the parent from Las Vegas to ask them, she said, Mom, I want to light Shabbos candles. If I don't keep Shabbos, is it a bracha levatova? This is a fried kid living in Las Vegas. Is it a bracha levatola? Right? One kid called, a male child, called a parent to say he's living with another woman. He was living with another woman for a few years. He said, he just got a product that he's not sure about the hechsher. Do you eat this hechsher? Okay? So there is a pintal yid there. What brings out that, the love can bring that child back. That acceptance and love and being there for them can bring a child like that back. What will chase the child away is become very critical of the child. That's of course, because there's a lot of pain going on, and they need to, be accepted for who they are, not for who you want them to be, but for who they are. And that's extremely important. If they have that, then there's a very good chance they come back. But even if they don't come back, because a lot of these people are escaping their pain in a lot of different ways. Some of them go to drugs, some of them go to sex, some of them get nervous breakdowns. They're very much in pain. They're trying to escape that pain, right? So the parent has to realize that that the way to bring this child back is so that they feel they have a home to go back to when they have all this pain. They feel they have a home, right? And that is extremely important for the parents to keep in mind all the time as the child lives their life, right? They have to keep that in mind. Yes.
First, I'd like to some complimentary remarks to what Rav Shurin was saying, and then I want to go back to about how to come to terms with it, which is another aspect of the question. Together with everything that Rav said, I think practically it's important to find a common ground, meaning there are things you can do with a kid off the derech. Maybe you have to expand your interests to not just being in the base medrash all day or at the work all day, or you have to go to a soccer game with them or other things. There are things that both in speech, we get used to certain, like the story was saying before, we get used to a certain type of speech, which is we worked on and we developed to speak the way we speak, and now there are mutar ways and preferable ways and other ways which one can speak and topics of interest which one can have. It might not be on how hard a hard rock band should smash a guitar. That might not be the place, but there are a lot of things that we can't expand ourselves to meet the child more where he is. That's one point. And I think perhaps the words is like acceptance with kviya. Kviya, hoping, is an amazing thing. And I'll emphasize here, I'm not an expert on this, but I share that we need to, on the one hand, accept. A child can't feel that every time a parent is talking to him, it's a kiruv lecture in disguise. He's going to run away from that. He won't speak to his heart. He'll see through it. So there has to be a full acceptance. But a person, his heart always keeps kviya, always keeps hoping. And anybody who needs chizuk in that, I would advise you to learn the drush binyan akivui from the Ramchal. It's found in Otzot the Ramchal. The midah of kviya, of hoping, always hoping. Al Kain Kabbalah is the greatest powers in the whole universe. And for sure, as Shurin said, we see nisim, we see children coming back, so there's no reason to stop being mikabeh. Together with the acceptance on one hand, the full-fledged acceptance on the other hand, with kvi on the other. And I think someone, a friend have told me also, you need boundaries. At the end of the day, the halacha is, to my understanding, chayecha kodman, a person's life comes first. An off the derech child can totally rip a person apart. You have a life, your spouse has a life. There is a place where one says chayecha kodman, your life comes first. Now, just the 2 words about coming to terms. This is my interpretation of that. How do I come to terms with the fact that my children make different terms? So I hear in that pain and guilt. That's what I hear in the questions. I'm going to respond to what I heard in the question. Maybe I was wrong. As I said before, you can make all the wrong moves and the children come out great. You can make all the right moves and the children don't come out the way we would hope for. That's, we can't be necessarily guilty about the totzaot. It doesn't necessarily help. We carry that, but the totzaot are not in our hands so often. But coming to terms also has a sense of something unredeemed. I put so much into the child. What's my totzah? A friend of mine said to me one time, "Where's my army of Talmidei Chacham that I hoped when I became religious?" A good friend said to me. So there's something unredeemed at the end of the day. It's not what we hoped for. So to redeem it, I thought for many years maybe perhaps it'd be a great toel to share the lessons of your struggle with other people. There are lessons in what you've gone through. There are plenty of forums, anonymous forums, where one can write and share. You can collect a few people together. There's other people who are 15 years, 20 years behind you and could gain great chizuk, great strength, and great guidance from the situations and the stories. And it's such a shame that I don't know of any cold resource to that extent where someone can turn to it and try to understand what is happening, what are the right moves to make, what mistakes do I have to avoid. So that's perhaps a way to come to terms with this terrible struggle.
So glad I'm answering third on this question. One thing I'm going to walk away from this conversation with is I think Rabbi Shurin is my Rebbe now. So I'm going to ask you everything that I was going to ask Rabbi Schoonmaker. Everything Rabbi Schoonmaker tells me to ask you. Okay. In terms of this particular question, so one thing that came to my head was the account of the rebellion of, if I remember correctly, it was Adoniyahu in Sefer Malachim, where the pasuk says about David v'lo atzavo, that he didn't make him sad. Now, with Rabbi Shurin's contemporary understanding, our job is not to rebuke over the head the child, but that it should be clear that there's no approval. Here there's no approval. So this touches upon the larger question of the mitzvah of tochacha, which is, to a great degree, related to the role of a parent. How do you guide? So, extraordinarily, normally we say, oh, there's no mitzvah to rebuke anybody anymore. All we do is to blame people, so we don't do it. But the point is, there is a mitzvah if you know how to do it, and it's important. And knowing how to do it often means through love. But if you can't do it in a way that's productive, then there is no mitzvah whatsoever. So this relates to what Schoonmaker mentioned, which is really, there is a great difference in coming to terms with and responding to. At some point, there's a response to. The response is love, encouragement, remembering, or Rabbi Karlinsky said, that children and parents have, that even when children reject their parents, they can't reject their parents completely. I've yet to be convinced by anybody, maybe someone will convince me, that there's somebody who's completely rejected everything their parents ever gave them. Because how can you possibly learn in a way other than how your parents taught you to learn. When you chose something good, even something better than what your parents had, it's because of the definition of good that your parents instilled in you. Good is kindness, good is truth, whatever it is. Because good is kindness, I tell my father, I became frum. Because good is truth, I became frum. You saw truth another way, but I'm just sharing the same value of truth that you valued. So if that's the basis, then parents and children can always have something to talk about. You should look at your child, God forbid a person comes to this, but look at your child and say, I recognize that you still keep the kashrus in Las Vegas or whatever it is. I mean, hopefully more than that, something deeper. I still love you because I know who you are and I know the basis for your decision. You're not crazy, right? You're trying to make something good. And if there's a continued giving of love, then you can respond. In terms of coming to terms with, so we have to remember, there's a long list of great tzaddikim of the generation, starting with Abraham and Yitzchak, whose children rejected Torah. Children rejected what we approve of. I want to just conclude with one story, which I think deals with both the coming to terms with and the response to. So again, we have to acknowledge that our children if we've done our jobs, we can't blame ourselves at the end of the day for the fact that Hashem gave everyone free will. That's the coming to terms with piece. And perhaps that's a question really more for your psychologist. And I say in all seriousness, or mental health professional, someone else who knows you inside and out and who understands the human mind, who can help you to come to terms with it, if that's where you're at. In terms of responding to, so I would emphasize this commonality of the midos. I just want to conclude with one story. I heard an amazing story from Rabbi Kenneth Brander about a family that he encountered when he was a rabbi in Florida, that they invited over. A family was not observant. I think the wife actually worked with his wife somewhere. They invited them over for a Shabbos or Yom Tov meal. And they knew that they were Jews, but not particularly observant. And over the meal, they get to talk, and they say, well, we have two things in our family that are really important traditions in our family. One is every Friday night, we get together. Every single Friday night. We get together often in a treif restaurant. But Friday night is Friday night, and we all get together, and it's very serious. And the other thing is we have no tolerance whatsoever in our family for speaking negatively about other people. So to the point that when someone new married into the family and started making nasty comments about somebody, everyone else in the family started going like this. It was really awkward in the room because we just don't do that in our family. We don't speak badly about people. Okay, very nice. They're continuing to talk over the meal, and ultimately this person turns to Rabbi Brandon and says, we have a rabbinic personality in our family. Maybe you've heard the name of Israel Meir Kagan. That's my great-grandfather. Rabbi Brander's jaw drops. You're the great-grandchild of Rabbi Israel Meir Kagan, the Chafetz Chaim. Come with me. Brings him into the other room. He shows him a whole bookshelf. The Mishnah Berurah, all 6 volumes, and the Chafetz Chaim, and the Shmiras HaLashon, and Ahavat Chesed. And this is the great-grandchild. So you see, wait a second. Now wait, they went off the derech, but they're still doing the mitzvah of Shmiras HaLashon. Still doing the mitzvah of Lashon Hara. More than that, this anchor of the shared value, the appreciation of this sensitivity, might even lead them back to Torah several generations later.
No, I think we make a mistake about thinking like, if I love the child and I, accept the child, then they'll become observant again. The goal in many of the cases is not to make them observant. The goal should be to make them functioning adults. That they should be able to function. Derech Eretz Kodmo Torah, meaning that the first thing you have to work on is Derech Eretz, and then we can work on Torah, right? Once they become a functioning adult, then we can work on the Torah. But what they're looking for, the pain that they have, is their existence, okay? If they're getting a nervous breakdown, you're not going to sit and worry about whether they're going to keep Shabbos or not. You're going to worry about that the person should become a responsible adult. And that has to be the first thing. They can't start feeling that everything is dependent upon religion, even though it's extremely important to you. And they actually know it's extremely important to you, so you don't have to shove it down their throats.
I'm sure everybody has lots of follow-up questions. Unfortunately, the format does not allow for it, but we will be walking over now to the yeshiva, and the rabbis are available both now, this evening, I'm sure among yourselves this will generate a lot of discussion, and we give a big yasher koyach to the three Rabbanim.